To Echoes of Swing. My name is April D. Shields, and we are sitting today with Mr. Terry Myers in Florida. Thanks so much for joining us today, Terry. Appreciate you
Pleasure, April. Thank you.
Down. And thank Linda for being your IT person today.
I'd be lost without her. I'd still be scrambling around here trying to figure out if this works.
Perfect response.
It's true.
Even
I didn't
more
have to
perfect
make
response.
that up. Yeah.
I met you many years ago, actually, in Sacramento, when you were playing with Bill Allred's classic jazz band. And one thing that I have to say that struck me the most, and I do mean struck, was you're the only reed in that wall of brass.
Yeah.
And you could be heard. And so that was impressive. I remember looking at Hedges and my mouth open, Chuck Hedges, and he just started laughing because he knew exactly, it was like he could read the words running across my brain. And it started with holy.
Well, yeah, that was a great band. Had so many great years with that band.
Yeah.
But it was a challenge to end up
Imagine.
beside four brass.
Yeah.
Especially four guys that could fill it up the way they did.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
well, and a lot of the charts you folks were playing in that band were Matty Matlock stuff, which, Matty being a clarinet player, he was heavy on different reed arrangements. So you were flipping horns. Like it was confusing just to watch you. So
actually, we had one arrangement, which it wasn't Matty's arrangement. It was a Billy May thing that Scott Whitfield had shrunk down for us.
Yeah.
It went from 35 parts down to 8. And so being that there were approximately 8 reed players or more on the session, I had all the reed parts to cover.
Right.
So I had tenor sax, clarinet, and piccolo. And on this arrangement of Oh by Jingle, I had 11 horn changes.
Yikes.
And Susan Allred used to tell Linda that she should put on like a nurse's outfit and stand next to me and hand me instruments, like instead of scalpel, it would be piccolo or something like that.
I like it. And hand you oxygen every so often.
Yeah, but what I used to do, I'm a bit of a ham. So I had, of course, I knew the arrangement very well.
Right.
And I had a place in the chart where, as I'm making a horn change, I kept a drink on the floor, like a bottle of beer.
Yeah.
And would pick up the beer and take a drink between changes, the horns changes. And for a while, none of the other horn players knew what I was doing. They would hear the audience laugh, but they're too busy playing their own stuff that they didn't see what I was doing. And it was kind of a sloppy drink because I had to hurry.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of go like this in between, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I know that you had told me that you had basically been starting playing professionally since you were 12. Not that many instruments, I'm sure.
Just saxophone.
Just saxophone. When did you add all the rest to your repertoire?
I started playing clarinet when I was 16, and I didn't play flute until I was in my early 30s. I was leaving teaching and coaching and moving to Nashville. And I knew that I was going to need to have flute as a double.
Right.
So I started playing flute about 6 months before I moved in.
Yeah.
And then the piccolo came later. I had 1980, when I moved to Central Florida, I got status to play at Disney World. And the first band that I played in frequently was the Fife and Drum Corps.
Oh.
So I had to learn how to play a fife.
Yeah. pretty quick. Yeah.
So they gave me 2 days to sit up on top of the diamond horseshoe in the broom closet and practice playing the fife, which essentially was like playing a piccolo, only it
Yeah.
was a wooden 6-hole fife, and so it was a different set of fingerings.
Yeah.
But I would practice for about 45 minutes or so, and then go down on the street and watch the group march and do their routines, so I could figure that out.
Yeah.
And then I started playing in the world band at Disney, which is like an 18-piece band or so. And one of my doubles was piccolo. So I had to buy a piccolo. But
Yeah.
learning to play the fife actually helped me make the transition.
Oh, well, that's interesting way to add it.
Yeah, it's not the exact way that I would recommend, but
Yeah.
it worked.
Under fire apparently works well for you in that respect.
Yeah, it did.
How long did you end up working at Disney?
Off and on until the COVID thing last
Oh.
year. I was still subbing at Disney, primarily at the Grand Floridian Hotel. They had a 6-piece band. It was the best gig on the property.
Yeah.
They played in an air-conditioned hotel.
Nice. No marching.
Yeah, no marching, just playing good music. That was a wonderful gig.
Is that the one that Davy Jones plays a lot as
Yeah,
well?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
exactly.
He's
Yeah, Bobby
always a lot.
Pickwood played there on Sunday and Monday. Bobby led it was a 7-day operation, so there
Yeah,
were
I'm
2
sure.
bands. Davy played in the 5-day band, and Bobby was the leader of the 2-day band.
Okay. Well, hopefully after COVID's over with, or once we can get there, you can go back to the happy place.
Yeah, although, they would have to rehire me, and I'd
Yeah,
have to go through.
all of that again.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to hire an old guy like me back. They have enough younger people that they can go.
Yeah, but can they play piccolo?
Well, that's true, but they don't have to in that game.
And a fife. Just
Just
saying.
flute and clarinet and sax. In fact, ironically, at the time that band went down in March of last year,
Mm-hmm.
it was the only saxophone position in the whole complex.
Really?
And it was such a switch because I remember in the late 80s and early 90s, we had approximately 350 full-time musicians working at Disney World, Epcot,
Yeah,
and MGM Studios.
right.
And through the years, that had gone down to, by the time COVID hit us last year, that had gone down to about 50 or 60.
Wow.
And out of that, only one was a saxophone position. So they they had changed their emphasis and started hiring a lot more people to be characters,
Yeah.
wearing new suits. Yeah, it's their ball game, and
Yeah.
they're going to do it the way they want.
Yeah.
But it's a
Sure.
lot different at Disneyland
Yeah.
because there are quite a few guys still playing in Orleans Square.
Yeah, I think Greg's still working there, I think. Our
Yeah,
old camp
well,
buddy.
now Greg, you
Or
mean Greg
was.
Barlotta?
Yeah.
No, he moved to Phoenix.
Oh, well, then he's not playing there.
No, but people like Rusty Stiers,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jason, and the Verdis, and Nate Kettner, I think works there.
Oh, yeah, probably. I think Ralph is still there too.
Well, Ralph moved. Ralph moved
Oh, he moved
to
permanently down there?
Guatemala, I
Yeah,
think.
Honduras or something. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
good for him. It's beautiful.
But anyway, they still do have quite a few guys working a few days a week.
Yeah.
there compared to what we have here.
Yeah. Well, there's so many musicians, at least here in California, that or had been raised here, that remember seeing a lot of great big bands at Disneyland. I mean, the fact live music is
Plaza.
so.
Yeah.
Mhm. People like Buddy Rich or Count Basie or
All of the bands.
yeah. So
Interestingly, the guy who used to be the agent for my big band
Uh-huh.
had worked for Willard Alexander office, and he
Yeah.
was in LA.
Yeah.
And this was when Walt Disney was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And Walt loved having the big bands play at
Mm-hmm.
Carnation Gardens or
Yeah.
Plaza, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing that Walt always insisted upon was that these not be pickup bands. He
Yeah.
wanted the real deal of the bands who were on the road and they come through and they'd hire them to play at Disneyland. So this agent's name was Wayne Hutchison. And so he told me the story. Walt wanted Louis Bellson band.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Louis was living, I think, I don't know if he had moved to LA yet or not, or if he was still in New York. I think Louis was still in New York. That was it. But he didn't have a band on the road, and he had a lot of friends in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So Wayne got a contract for Louis to play there for a few days. Well, he hired a bunch of LA guys. And this was about the time that the Instamatic cameras came out.
Uh-huh.
And so the first day the band would be there, Wayne would sit at a table with Walt Disney and his entourage. And he said, so the band came out, they introduced the Louis Bellson Orchestra, and the band came out and took their places. And then the announcer introduced them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Louis Bellson. And Louis walked on stage, and 3 or 4 guys in the band pulled out their Instamatic cameras and started taking pictures of Louis. And so Wayne says, I kind of slinked down in my
Yeah.
chair, but he said Walt was looking over at me like, kidding me, you know.
Uh-huh.
So he
Your
said
regular guy.
the next day he had a call from Walt's secretary, and
Uh-huh.
he said, I knew I had a butt chewing coming. So he
Yeah.
said I had to go have lunch with Walt and have him tear me up one side and down the other because I put a pickup band.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, all the great bands played there.
Yeah. I know that Judy Carmichael said that that's, I think, how she said she had met Basie initially was from just him playing there a lot.
Yeah.
And Hal Smith was talking about, well, of course, some of the guys that worked for Disney, the Firehouse Five, playing there. And just, I mean, especially where the entrance is. I don't know about Walt Disney World. I've never been there, but at least for Disneyland itself, that's the whole 1910s kind of atmosphere anyway. And so that's where you're used to all the music being. It's just kind of bare when you go in now. You don't really feel the same way, but
I know.
it's their ball game.
I visited Disneyland when I was 16, and that was 1 year after the park had opened. In fact, I think I might be wrong, but I was either the day of the first anniversary or very close to it.
Right.
And I was 16 and I'd already been playing gigs and everything. And
yeah,
I was just blown away at all the fine musicians that were around the park at that time.
Oh yeah. I think Jackie Coon was in the band at one of the bands at that point in time. Yeah.
He was. Of course, I didn't know who Jackie Coon was at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were a lot of great players in those early days.
Yeah.
And it was not by accident, because that's what Walt Disney wanted. He wanted great musicians and live music and have it everywhere.
Yeah.
But those things changed over the years.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just the way of the world, and
good or bad
business.
Yeah, exactly. Now, didn't you work with Louis before, or am I mistaken?
Who?
Louis Bellson. Didn't you work with him before?
I have worked with him. Yeah.
How'd you get that gig?
Well, there were 2 different occasions. Louis used to come to Disney World and play at the Village Lounge, which in those days, all the top jazz players would come through and play at the Village Lounge. and work with a house rhythm section there. But when Louis would come, he would also come over to the park and do a day with the World Band, and he'd do a couple concerts in Fantasy Fair with the World Band.
Oh, okay.
And I remember one of the things that Louis got done that was a big help to us. The band leader was a good guy, but not necessarily a musician first. He was more of a showman.
Right.
And he had the band spread all over Hell's Half Acre, over the stand, and had characters jumping up and down in front of us. And we always wanted to get into the regular big band block formation, you know, with
Yeah.
saxes and
You can hear each
trombones,
other. Yeah.
trumpets, and yeah, we're used to hearing that sound. But the leader wouldn't hear of it. So one day, Louis came into the rehearsal room and ran over his stuff with us that we were going to do the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that night, I went over to the Village Lounge to see Louis and listen to him. And I pulled him aside and I said, Louis, I don't know if you noticed, but you wouldn't have in the rehearsal room. But when we go on stage, we don't set up in the block formation. We set up, we're just spread out all over.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, we can't. And I said,
Yay.
well, it'd be nice if you would
Yeah.
pass that along, you know. So the next day he came in and he had a roadie with him to set up his stuff. And he's talking to the leader of the band and he says, oh, what's this setup? Like he didn't know.
Yeah.
And the leader says, oh, yeah, that's the way. Louis said, no, we can't do that.
Good for him.
We have to have it set up in a block.
Yeah.
So we did, and the band sounded better than it had sounded in many months.
I'm sure.
And we never went back to the other formation. So
Nice.
Louis got that done for us. And then a number of years later, and I think it was 99, I was asked by a jazz society in Vero Beach to put together an Ellington program, celebrate his 100th birthday.
Yeah.
And so I got Louis to come in to do that, and Bill Berry.
Yeah.
And they came in from California, and I had
Right.
Buster Cooper, who lived here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
He played with Duke. And then I filled in the rest of the group with Florida guys, including Dr. Lonnie Smith, whom we just lost.
Yeah, lost. Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing because the guy who was head of the Vero Beach Jazz or Treasure Coast Jazz Society, when he found out I had Lonnie on piano, he got a message to me that he'd rather I didn't use Lonnie because he didn't like the way he dressed and stuff. And because Lonnie would wear his turban and
Yeah.
big flowing robes.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I can't pull the plug on him. I hired him. The gig is good. He's going to be. And he kind of mumbled something, but I thought, well, I got that settled. Well, a few days later, the guy who was in charge of talent booking for the Jazz Society called me and he says, we had a meeting last night. And I've been informed to tell you that you can't have Lonnie Smith, Dr. Lonnie, on piano. And I said, okay, that's your choice. Then you all got it. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull the plug on a friend of mine.
Right.
For a stupid reason like this.
Yeah. Very stupid reason.
Yeah. And so, like, within a few hours, I got a call back from the guy for talent booking for them, and he goes, oh, we had an emergency meeting. We don't want you to bail on us. Please do it.
Yeah.
I said, with Doc? And he said, yes. I said, okay, I'll do it. And the beauty of it was the night of the concert, I think Dr. Lonnie got bigger applause than anybody in the band because he was so outstanding. You know? And anyway, I never told Lonnie that story. He never knew that happened.
Yeah. Well, why would you tell him? Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, it's good that you stood your ground, not only just because of a friend, but the whole principle of the thing anyway, even if you hadn't been a friend.
Oh yeah. Anyway, also we got to spend quite a bit of time with. We were talking about Louis.
Uh-huh.
Linda and I picked Louis and his wife up at the airport in Orlando.
Mhm.
We had a couple hours to drive down to Vero. So we got to spend a couple of days with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was such a nice
He was. I met he and his wife up in Los Gatos or San Jose or something like that, also in the 90s. It was just such a sweet man. Just he found out that had gotten I got some kind of, probably because the radio show, some kind of press pass of some sort or another that they had given me. And so he was trying to figure out, because I was what, 20, 21,
man.
trying to figure out what the heck I was doing there with a press pass. So
Yeah.
I told him
Yeah, are
right.
you in the wrong place?
Yeah, which was the usual look I got, as you know, for many years anyway, because they just were trying to go, I don't understand this. But he was just sweet and gracious and kind. And he had
That's just the
actually,
way he was.
yeah, and he had mentioned Bill Berry because Bill, as you said, and Betty lived down in LA at that time, and
Yeah.
asked when I'd seen them last. And I said, well, just last month, the Monterey Jazz Festival. And he was just as sweet as he could be. And his wife,
I,
of course, was real protective of him, but she was awful sweet too once she realized nobody was after anything.
I have a good Bill Berry story.
Oh, yeah.
With the Allred band, we were touring England,
Uh-huh.
and we ended up playing a jazz festival in a little town called Grimsby, which
Uh-huh.
is on the English Channel side in the northern part of England. And as it turned out, it was a big jazz festival. It was in a soccer stadium and everything, but it was really cool. There was a hotel where all the bands were staying. And Bill Berry was there playing with a bunch of good English guys.
Yeah.
And Lou Morrow was our bass player at the time with the Allred band. He was the original bass player in classic.
Oh, okay.
And Lou and I were talking, and I said, Bill Berry is here? And he says, oh, really? Bill and I used to work together at the Copa in New York
Uh-huh.
years. And I said, oh, well, I saw him just a few minutes ago. You want to go see Bill? And he says, yeah. So this place was really packed. And I took him over to where Bill was, and Bill turned around and he was going, he walked right past Lou, and Lou walked right past him. They didn't recognize each other. And I had to reach out and grab Bill by the arm before he got away. And Bill, Lou Morrow, Bill Berry, and they were hugging each other and telling stories. But, it'd probably been 25 years since they
I'm
had
sure.
seen each other.
Yeah.
And, but they had both, I can't imagine they had changed that much, because Lou, to me, always looked like a guy who always came. But
Yeah.
anyway, I got hooked back up. But if I hadn't been there, they would have not recognized one another.
Yeah. Well, it's just people, yeah, the age is not a happy thing in that respect of how it changes sometimes, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, he and Gerald Wilson would just sit there, and I'd just be sitting at the table, and they'd just be telling some funny stories. And sometimes, because when I first started going there, Dizzy was still coming every year to help with the youth concerts. So I remember one time it was getting late for me. It was about 11 or so, and I'm just sitting there and Saunders called my cell phone. And of course, it was one of those little brick things. And I'm sitting there kind of just listening to him. And Saunders calls and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You would never believe it."
Yeah. Speaking of Dizzy, Bill Allred was telling me that he was I think they were in Vienna, and they were with the Wild Bill Legacy group.
Yeah.
And they were playing at Jazzland, which is a
Yeah.
legendary old club downstairs in Vienna, and Dizzy. And so he and Wild Bill started talking, and Wild Bill invited him up to sit in with the band. And Allred says, I have no idea what we're going to do with Dizzy
Yeah.
Gillespie.
Right.
And Wild Bill says, Diz, well, what do you want to play? And Dizzy says, how about Royal Garden Blues?
Yeah.
And Bill said he knew all the sections. He knew all the
Uh-huh.
parts. And it was the last thing in the world you were ever going to expect from Dizzy, that he would know one of the old Warhorse trad tunes, you know.
Oh man. Well, I want to say he spent quite a bit of time with Art Hodes or I think, and did
In
a lot of,
Chicago.
yeah. And
No, he played with everybody.
yeah,
But we forget that before bebop,
yeah.
Dizzy was playing all that stuff.
Yep, exactly.
You know?
We've spent a great deal of time at jazz camp trading lots of stories, but you've what should we say? You're the man of many professions, I guess. You've been,
Yeah, I've actually led maybe 3 different lives
yeah, or
in
more.
or more. And I can honestly say that I've enjoyed just about every step of the way.
Yeah.
You know, when I didn't know I was going to go to college.
Yeah.
I had planned to, when I graduated from high school, to join the Navy and go to the Navy School of Music and maybe, you know, spend 4 years and then go somewhere and play.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about the great service band that exists, like especially in the real top bands in DC,
Right.
which is something I could have aspired to. But when I was a senior in high school, my mother got a job as in the housekeeping department at Drake University.
Mm-hmm.
As it turned out, the policy at Drake was if you were a dependent of an employee, any employee, you had free tuition.
How cool.
All I had to do was buy my own books and pay $12.50 a semester for a student activity.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Not bad.
So I couldn't pass it up. So I decided I would go in and major in music education, because when you grow up in Des Moines, there's no scene where you're thinking, oh, I want to be a professional musician.
Right.
People don't do that for a living
Yeah.
unless they're really good, like George Roberts, you know, or
Yeah.
somebody who went
Yeah.
to my school. And but he was 11 years ahead of me, so I didn't really know him anyway. But I thought, well, I'll get my degree and be able to be a music teacher. And so I started at Drake, and I ended up, as a music major, I had to be in the marching band. And I never encountered anything I hated as much as marching band.
You and me both.
And I just said, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to teach anybody else to do this.
Yeah.
So I changed my major at the end of my first semester and went in. I always loved sports and played a lot of different sports. So I thought, I'll just switch over to phys ed. So I did, and I still graduated in time and went out and got married just before my senior year. And my wife was an elementary ed teacher or a student, and we both graduated. And we got jobs at a small town in western Iowa, where I was the head football coach, boys basketball coach, track coach, and baseball coach summer. Taught American history, American government, and world history, and high school boys PE.
They have any other teachers there?
No. And I always remember that contract paid me $5,000.
They got such a deal out of that.
Yeah, such a deal. And so I did that for a couple of years. and then moved on to a school up in northern Iowa where I was assistant football coach and head boys basketball coach and head track coach, and taught American government and American history
Mm-hmm.
and boys PE. And did that for a couple of years. And then I moved on to a bigger school up in Northeast Iowa, and where I had my worst basketball team ever. And, but I was only there 1 year, and I was working on, every summer I was working on my master's degree.
Right.
And at the end, in 1966, as I went back down to Maryville, Missouri. I was getting my degree from the University of Missouri at Northwest Missouri State. It was a cooperative program. And I went down, I had gotten to know the Dean of Administration because he had been my neighbor the first year I was in grad school.
Okay. Yeah.
I was staying at the basketball coach's house, and the dean lived next door, and we got to be friends.
Yeah.
So when I went down to commencement to get my master's degree, he came to the hotel and offered me the job of being assistant dean of administration and director of admissions, Northwest Missouri State.
Got your diploma and a new job at the same time.
Yeah, I did. And I was able to get out of going back to the school in Northeast Iowa.
With the awful basketball team.
Yeah, it was going to be better next year. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple of them. And it was good. I learned a lot.
I'm sure.
I had never read a college catalog before, and now it was my responsibility to put it together. And so it was fun. But, you know, I was kind of bored. And I remember in spring of 68, late winter of 68, I went up to Des Moines for the state basketball tournament, was hanging out with a bunch of my old coaching friends.
Yeah.
And I realized that I missed coaching, and I was, even though I had this great job,
yeah,
I just didn't feel compelled to stay in. So the following Monday, I went into the dean's office, tell him I was going to look for a high school coaching position. And his jaw dropped, and he said, well, you know, he said, the president and I will take you to lunch today because we have a fellowship at the University of Missouri in Columbia for you to go over there and get your doctorate and be assistant registrar and get your doctorate. And their goal was to make me the youngest college president in the country. And I said, well, I really, I really appreciate this offer.
Yeah.
But I said, I've watched Dr. Foster, who was our president, go to Jeff City once or twice a week and kiss the ass of the legislature for money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it was a private school, I'd be flying all over the country kissing the butt of alumni for money.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So I turned them down. And so instead of becoming a college president, I went back to coaching and did that and coached. And then the school that hired me, what I didn't realize was their principal was going into his last year. And they had designs on my taking his place as principal, but I didn't.
They didn't share them. Yeah, they didn't share that with you.
So when he announced his retirement, they offered me the principal's. I said, well, since I'm the fourth basketball coach here in 5 years.
Don't do that to the kids.
No, I have to keep it.
Yeah.
And so I did. But then I had friends who had moved to Nashville and were really busy playing down there.
Yeah, because you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so they contacted me about this new park, Opryland, that was going to open up in Nashville. and they were going to audition for players, and they said I should come down and audition. So I did. I drove down to Nashville and went to the Grand Ole Opry House. We auditioned,
How neat.
and I got hired.
Yeah.
So that was it. Moved to Nashville. Boom.
Is that when you started, I mean, the first time you started doing music full time on a full-time basis at that
Well,
point?
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when I was in college, the last 2 years I was in college, I was working 6 nights a week in the club.
Yeah.
But, in terms of that basically just being my living, yeah,
Yeah.
that,
Neat.
that was
Well,
in 1972.
yeah. Well, if it's a steady gig, might as well.
Yeah.
As long as it pays
And
the
it
bills.
was, as it turned out, it was, they had a show that they had 2 bands alternated doing this show.
Uh-huh.
And about halfway through the season, my counterpart in the other band had to quit for some reason. I can't remember why. So rather than break in a new person, they asked me if I would play in both bands. So I did. So I was doing 8 shows a day
Oh my
for,
gosh.
I forget how many months.
Well, now I know where you got your chops of steel, that's for sure.
It